Well, good evening, everyone. Good afternoon, whenever you may be watching this. If you're watching the recording, we appreciate it any way you get to us. Thanks for tuning in for another episode of Progressively Yours podcast or vodcast. I think we're going to be moving to that because it is a video podcast. And as usual, we have a great show lined up for you. I'm Dr. Imani Ma'at.
J. Bernard Kine Sr.
And together we are Sankofa Institute for Wellness, as well as the podcast. And we're just in a place of grace and grace and gratitude. 1 week ago, my mother made her transition, and we don't normally pre-record the shows, and we happened to do it for last Tuesday's show because our guest has a show in the time slot right after ours, and it wasn't going to work. So we, many people who in with us and follow us have been sending lots of, condolence, love, and blessings, and it has been, this whole experience has been made so much easier because of the love and support that we've been receiving. So thank you all so much for your kind support. With that, I'm going to hand it over to Bernard.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I'd like to begin our podcast, which is our ritual and tradition, with our spiritual opening. I would like to invite you, those who wish to participate, to take a few deep breaths. I also like to invite you to close your eyes just for a moment. I want to strike the tingshaws and offer a word to the ancestors for which we pay homage, but we do not worship. And then a brief reading by Thich Nhat Hanh from his book, The Art of Communicating, portions of the first mantra. So would you join me by closing your eyes? We offer thanks and gratitude to the ancestors for being with us this afternoon, this evening, I should say, for the opportunity of sharing with our listening audience. We're grateful for Imani for being able to be with us in the midst of the loss of her mom. And we lift her and her family and the family up for spiritual benedictions. For our guest tonight, Dr. Bouquette, who will share with us from his heart and his mind and his spirit. Thanks for our producers, and we thank you for joining us in this space and place at this appointed time. Ashe.
Ashe.
And namaste.
Namaste.
A brief word from Thich Nhat Hanh in the book, The Art of Communicating. This first mantra, he is talking about how to be for others. Hear these words. The first mantra is, I am here for you. This is the best gift you can give a loved one. Nothing is more precious than your presence. No matter how expensive the life for someone else, they are not as precious as your true presence. That wonderful presence is fresh, solid, free, and calm. And you offer it to your loved ones to increase their happiness and your own happiness. I am here for you. To love someone means to be there for him or for her. To be there is an act and a practice. Pardon me, is an art and a practice. Are you truly there for the person you love 100%? Using the skills of mindful breathing and mindful walking, you can bring together your body and mind to restore yourself and produce your true presence in the here and in the now. To be there like that for yourself and for the other person is an act of love. It is for the ancestors. Ashe.
Ashe.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
And I was going to skip this, but it's so relevant to what you were saying about being there and being present and that being an act of love. Our guest last week, Reverend Sandy Rogers, her book is The A's Habit, Abandonment, Abortion, and Addiction. And we went through some of the book, but some of the lessons learned and shared in the book. And I was just flipping through this evening, and I just wanted to share something that really caught me. Talk about forgiveness last week, and this kind of ties forgiveness with love. And it says, focus on forgiveness and create love. That is the way of the ascended. That is what the ancestors accomplished. That is the teachings of Christ, of Jesus the Christ. Create love. That stops me in my tracks. To envision this awesome power sends chills down my spine. The love spoken here is the essential, unconditional agape love. The love that does not ask for anything in return. Love that just love to love. Love that is quenched by knowing it is giving complete love to others. Love that does not judge nor criticize. Love that is complete within itself. That is the kind of love you get to experience when you freely forgive. So I just wanted to share that. And I do like connecting from week to week. Last week, what did we focus on? And so, our theme is love. And again, my mom passed on Valentine's Day. And my story is that a year ago, and she left almost to the day, 3 or 4 days apart, to go join him on Valentine's Day. And I think that's such a beautiful act of love. And again, it's my story. we create stories that make us feel better. But they certainly poured love into our family and community, the church, and everyone that came in contact with them. We're grateful to them for the love with us. And with that, I'm going to turn it back over to you.
All right. And that love I've witnessed from your mom, as I've got to know her over there. I've witnessed that love expressed through you and through your sister Arlene, and it's beautiful to the family members and to Tracy, who cared for her so lovingly and so caringly. So
and Lisa and Sonia, they both poured love too, and so it's been a journey for all of us, but a beautiful one in a lot of ways.
Yes. Well, I have the honor of introducing our guest. I've known Dr. Bouquette since 2015, and say that when I initially met him, I was a patient, and so I'm revealing that up front at Progressive Medical Center. And I'm so honored when I saw him last Saturday. It just came to me, I got to get him on the show, because he's such a brilliant physician, caring. And it had been years since I had a physician to spend 45 minutes with me. And I never forget that first visit. I've been going to other medical facilities for care, and I had a couple of clients on to Progressive and had talked about Progressive. And generally, if my clients tell me something interesting, I got to check it out. They can't do, I have to do what they do, so to speak. So I went to Progressive, and this is my story before I tell you more of his professional background. And I went in, and he greeted me, "Hello, Bernard, good to meet you." And as we sat to while I was coming, first thing he asked me, he says, "Do you have a recorder on your phone?" And I said, "Yes." He said, "I want you to record my notes so that you can go back and play them." So I said, "Okay." And I recorded my notes, and he was extremely professional, very personable, took great interest in my health, and shared questions with me that no other physician had asked before. And so I was sold, and I knew at that moment that whatever they had to offer, I was going to experience and experiment with. And so from then to now, I'm still there. So I want to thank him publicly and personally for taking that care and interest in me. So who is our guest? Well, it's Viktor Bouquette, and Victor is with the K here, is a traditionally trained MD. Dr. Bouquette attended Johns Hopkins University in Baltimore, Maryland, as an undergrad, and attended the medical school at the Ohio State University College of Medicine in Columbus, Ohio, and entered a resident in internal medicine at Emory University here in Atlanta, Georgia. For 14 years, he practiced emergency medicine while admittedly enjoying the adrenaline rush and the immediate gratification of the quote, treat 'em and street 'em, end quote, protocols utilized for acute care and emergency medicine. He also became acutely aware and disconcerted by the increases in chronic disease among children, autism, ADD, chronic infections, asthma. Rates were steadily increasing each year, unabated by antibiotics, steroids, and psychoactive drugs that were being prescribed by internists and pediatricians like bags of M&Ms, he writes. Beginning in 19, Bouquette took a 2-year sabbatical and began studying integrative and functional medicine. Became board certified in the clinical science of and regenerative medicine by the American Academy of Anti-Aging Medicine. In 1999, he co-founded Progressive Medical Center, a private medical practice located here in Atlanta, Georgia. Dr. Bouquette became the medical director of PMC in 2001, and under his direction, Progressive Medical Center has grown to become the largest and the most successful practice of its kind in the Southeast. Progressive Medical Group has generated an astonishing population of over 32,000 patients since 1999. Over the years, in addition to traditionally trained MDs, the Progressive Medical Group also has employed physicians, assistants, osteopath, naturopath doctors, chiropractors, registered dietitians, a massage therapist, and a colonic hydrotherapist who is an ancestor now. That I pause there because I get all fluid when I think about Ilan and the care that he provided for me, and Dr. say a little bit more as we move on. Who worked in tandem to provide an integrative, and that's the key word, an integrative approach Bouquette.
Hello, guys. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Loud
Oh,
and
sorry.
clear.
I was buffering. So thank you for the great introduction, guys. Um, Actually, I have to say that Bernard, not only were you a patient, but you've become a friend and actually a trusted colleague. So we'll talk about that at the end of the show because you brought tremendous value to our integrative approach from a psychological perspective. But again,
You.
thank you for having me. Um, as you know, and I'd like for your audience to know, is that our approach is, as you say, integrative. We treat chronic illness. So some 40% of Americans suffer from chronic illness, whether it be hypertension or diabetes or obesity, arthritis, mental health problems, anxiety, depression, insomnia. So we treat a variety of different scenarios based on inflammation. So one of the things that we recognize over the years is that most chronic illnesses have some commonalities, and that commonality is actually inflammation. One of the primary drivers for aging is inflammation. And so, in general, if you're able to understand what creates inflammation in a given individual, we can successfully treat chronic illnesses. One of the reasons that, as you mentioned, it takes about 45 minutes in a first visit is because the patient's history is very important.
Mm.
Unfortunately, in traditional allopathic medicine, the the rule of thumb now is it's about 17 minutes from the time that you enter your doctor's office to the time that they write your prescription and get you on your way. So it's almost back to my old treat 'em and street 'em ER days. And it's
Mm.
really because the insurance companies dictate how medicine is practiced. It's really the standard of care is dictated by the insurance companies and basically the pharmaceutical industry. The pharmaceutical industry is a publicly traded company, so their job is to give you as many drugs as they can and have you take them till you stop breathing, till you join the ancestors. And then from the insurance company's perspective, they also are publicly traded companies. So at the end of the day, they want to make as much money as possible. A lot of people mistakenly believe that doctors make a lot of money. Now, some do, the super specialties like neurosurgeons and thoracic surgeons. But by and large, your primary care physician is a working class. He's just working hard, hard, hard just to keep up. And he's making a little bit of money for each patient, but he has to see volumes and volumes of patients each day. And that's unfortunately is why so many people suffer from chronic illness.
Mm. Thank you for that. And as you share that history and the background, and as it relates to public health crisis, can you more about the major health conscious awakening, inclusive of the recent pandemic and that cause that has created the scare in our culture and in our society, and what are some things that you would like to say regarding the aftermath of that experience?
Well, one of the things that COVID uncovered was the disparity between the way uh, races and socioeconomic classes of people are treated. So, in general, President at the time, Trump, got COVID, and had he not been the president and received hundreds of thousands of dollars of care in a very short period of time, he would have probably been he would have succumbed. So he essentially went to Walter Reed and had the very best care. If that had happened to you or I, we'd be, especially in the early stages of the pandemic, we would have been out of luck. So one of the things to realize, Bernard, is that primarily the people who didn't do well from contracting COVID had underlying chronic illnesses. They had hypertension or diabetes, or they were overweight, they didn't exercise, they had poor diets. And so by and large, people who got COVID, who were otherwise pretty healthy in general, did well. People who were already suffering from comorbidities or had chronic illnesses didn't do well. Now, this is going to be controversial, but I have to share it with you. So up until COVID, I hadn't done a vaccine since 1983, since I was at Grady Emory, because vaccines in general are basically a guess. In other words, what happens is if there's a flu the previous year, then a decision is made by the pharmaceutical industry to decide what virus may come about the following year, and then they mix up a concoction, and so you have a 50% chance of it working. Now, some people in the past would take a vaccine and get worse. Others would have symptoms of a flu, for instance, and others didn't have any symptoms at all. So it's not the vaccine so much as it is the milieu, the person that you're putting into. So what I learned with COVID, so again, I hadn't had a vaccine, but I took the COVID vaccine because there were so many unknowns. It actually became politicized because of the way that it was initially handled by the Trump administration. So had it not been for that, I would have sat back and let everybody else get vaccinated. And then there's something called herd mentality. When the people around you are vaccinated, you have less chance of getting it. But now I have a 4-year-old child, and so I want to make sure that I didn't bring that virus home. So I was vaccinated. So then there's all of these, there are all of these rumors and innuendos that the vaccine itself was harmful. In and of itself, the vaccine wasn't harmful, but there are people who had side effects. It is certainly true. But 1 million people recorded died of COVID, in the United States. And so it's still clearly no joke, a very real problem. So I would say to you that this is just the beginning. There are going to be other pandemics, because what's happening is that as a society, the American society especially, our diet, our lack of exercise, and the stressors that we have are going to cause these pandemics to become more lethal. So I would say to your audience that the primary way to get around getting ill is to first be healthy, right? Then the virus, your immune system will get you through the storm if you're otherwise healthy.
Good. Thank you.
Well, lots of thoughts going on in my head, and I don't want to dwell on the role of pharmaceuticals and insurance companies in terms of dictating what happens in the medical field. But I know there are a lot of folks who believe that that those industries help to create the fear and the issues around COVID. And so, some people say, well, we've had a major flu epidemic every year. It's like, what happened to the flu this year? Oh, this year it's called COVID. So I would like for you to address that, because, and some may say, oh, that's just, what do you call it? When, people are concerned about what's going on, they don't really have the facts. But
that's actually it's a valid concern. So you're able to, so viruses can be typed, like there are different types of influenza. So the flu is an influenza virus. And so you can tell what type of virus it is by looking at the genetic markers. But what's really most telling is how lethal the virus is. So there are some you can get the flu now. Certainly hundreds of thousands of people do die of the flu every year. Same thing. People who are otherwise not healthy, older people or little kids. But in general, what made COVID so different was the initial strains were highly contagious and highly lethal. I would agree, though, that the pharmaceutical industries that make vaccines can't be sued. That's just crazy. So just imagine that. So they're sticking people with a spike every year. If something goes wrong, they can't be sued. Now that's an anomaly. So they're a publicly traded company, so they want to make money. For instance, what they're trying to do now is make COVID vaccines a yearly thing. That's just nonsense. Again, the bottom line is that now that we understand the virus, how it's transmitted, and then the communicability, how contagious it is, as it were, you don't really, in my opinion, you don't really need a vaccine. You just have to keep your immune system healthy, right? Mm-hmm. But no, it's really what's happening with the pharmaceutical industry is that the cost of drugs are going up. The cost of medical care is going up about 6% a year. Inflation is like 2% a year. So it's triple the rise of inflation. And so at some point, they're going to price themselves out of the market. It's becoming so expensive. Even insulin or asthma medications, for instance, the average person with those chronic conditions can't afford it. The pharmaceutical industry is just raising the prices, and at the end of the day, they're going to do the same thing with the COVID. They're going to try to make as much money as they can before they move on to the next thing. Now, after having said that, in my opinion, there is no great conspiracy to release the COVID virus on the environment so they can make money. It was just that they were already doing mRNA testing, and so they realized. So it's been forecast because of global warming, and that's another story we get into. But communicable diseases are going to become more and more rampant, and they're going to become more and more lethal. There's several 100,000 chemicals in the air and the water and the food. So as individuals, we aren't as healthy as we could be. And so if a virus comes along, what happens is the individual who's already compromised is going to get ill. that individual probably should consider taking a vaccine. Now, women actually had, have more complications with the vaccine. They would have, sometimes would have, soreness at the spot they were injected, or they would have women who are in their reproductive years would have menstrual irregularities. But that's actually consistent with, for instance, 80% of people with autoimmune problems are women. 80% of people with Alzheimer's are women. So the fluctuating monthly hormones of women produce more inflammatory responses. A lot of people say, well, I had these bad problems, with the COVID vaccine, but they're still alive. Like I said, 1 million people died from COVID. So you have to kind of weigh the pluses and minuses.
Mm-hmm. Talk a little bit about diet and how people can certainly enhance their immune systems and their body's ability to fight off bacteria, viruses, and so forth. Just having a good, strong, healthy diet. And how would you define a healthy diet?
Well, we'll start by the antithesis. This is the standard American diet, SAD. So the standard American diet is in fact SAD. It's really mostly refined carbohydrates, a lot of bread and pasta and starchy carbs or salty carbs. Even things like cereal. People say, oh, I have cereal. There's nothing in nature that looks like cereal. It's just basically ground up grain, runs through a machine, turned into a pulp, and then you dump a bunch of cow's milk on it and then think it's a healthy breakfast. So my story is, when I was in Baltimore in the late 70s, I listened to a speaker named Dick Gregory. Dick Gregory remember Dick Gregory? So so I became a vegetarian. So I thought I was doing great. I was eating no animal products. I was in Baltimore, so I ate some seafood because you get fresh seafood. But by and large, my diet was carbohydrates. So let's first define the ways of taking calories. There are actually only 3 ways to take in calories: either protein, fat, or carbohydrate. So let's define the 3. Proteins and fats, by and large, are associated with meat. So let's say you have a steak. The flesh part is protein, the fat is around it. Chicken is leaner, so the fat is in the skin, right? Now, there are some exceptions. Soybean has protein and olive oil has fat, but by and large, proteins and fats are associated with meat. Everything else is a carbohydrate. Think of a carbohydrate as anything that comes from the ground. If it comes out of the ground, it's a carb. So bread, rice, pasta, fruits, vegetables, sugar, those are all carbs. So by and large, the American diet is a lot of refined carbohydrates. So not apples and oranges, but apple and orange juice. It's all been processed. And so the healthiest diet one could have is going to be probably close to what our ancestors ate, which is going to be something that comes out of the ground that's not adulterated and not processed. Now, after having said that, exercise is also the other component, because what happens is the vast majority of people take in more calories than they burn. If you take in more calories than you burn, ultimately your body will turn it into fat. Your blood sugar, your body becomes resistant to insulin, and you have diabetes type 2. Alzheimer's is called diabetes type 3. So again, those are all inflammatory processes that come from having high blood sugar and insulin resistance. So the best diet one could possibly have would be a combination of natural foods that are carbohydrates and some animal products. For whatever reason, for instance, the good Lord wants humans to eat meat, because if you don't eat red meat for 10 years, you get a vitamin B12 deficiency. So that implies in general that red meat is going to be good for you. And perhaps not at the quantities that Americans are eating, but you do need it as part of your diet. So we have teeth and we have a digestive system that suggests that we're omnivorous, not just carnivorous. So we should eat fruits and vegetables. So what I try to do and have my patients do is eat more whole grains, fruits and vegetables, and then a minimal amount of red meat, and then mostly, lean meats like turkey, chicken, and that sort of thing. Lots of water, and stay away from juices. The worst thing that you could possibly consume is a fruit juice.
Wow. Dr. Bouquette, let's shift just a little and we can come back to the medical conversation. Tell our audience about who you are early in life, who inspired you when you look back over your story to move into the area to become a physician. Who was your early models? What was early life like, and how did you follow down this path? Yeah.
Well, that's a good question. I've never been asked that before. So my my inspiration was actually my grandfather. But my story is that my mother grew up in a small town in Tennessee called Mount Pleasant, Tennessee. It's about 50 miles south of Nashville. And so as a young woman, she was married and divorced. And so my grandfather, who was a deacon in the church, uh, and a treasurer, even though he didn't have any formal education of the church, basically was my mentor. And so he taught me to shoot a gun and taught me how to drive at like age 8 or 9, because we lived out in the country. He had 50 acres. But my mother remarried when I was in the first grade, and she married a physician who was an ophthalmologist. He was actually he was there in the time that he was practicing in Dayton, Ohio. We moved to Dayton, Ohio. There's only 3 Black ophthalmologists in the entire state of Ohio, and he was one of them. So he was a jazz musician, and so Miles Davis came to our home, and Freddie Hubbard. So he was an accomplished jazz musician, but because of his dexterity, he was a great surgeon. He actually did a lot of cataract extractions and retinal surgeries. So anyway, he was my inspiration. So basically, a couple of times watching him do surgery and seeing his relationship with the community prompted me to become a doctor. Now, after having said that, he was like many surgeons. He was very egocentric, so he wasn't a great family person. And so again, I was basically on my own. But at least that was the initial inspiration that got me going. So I was educated in a Black inner city school in Dayton, Ohio, and I did very well on the SAT. So I got a scholarship to Johns Hopkins. But it was huge culture shock. I graduated top of my class in an inner city school at Hopkins. All the classics that they had read and all the things that they took for granted, I had to learn all over again. So it was a very, very stressful scenario there for me. But I just committed. I was in a library, 18 hours a day. And then I took up martial arts. I began studying martial arts at like 18. And so that was the discipline, the physical discipline that I needed. And then the mental discipline was that I already saw myself as a physician. And so I didn't. All of my friends had plans. If they didn't get in medical school, I had no plan because I was going to get in. It's just a drive. I believed I could do it. But that was my inspiration. But he wanted me to practice ophthalmology with him in Dayton. But eye surgery is operating on 1 square inch of the body or 2 square inches of the body, and it just didn't interest me. So though I did internal medicine, I wanted to be an ER doctor because it was exciting. So then I did ER medicine.
Wow, thank you. And you did ER medicine here in Atlanta?
Yeah, I did. I did a residency. I came to Atlanta in '83. At the time, Emory was one of the most sought. I think it was like number 3, the most sought after residency in the country, because everybody wanted to come to Atlanta back then. Atlanta was growing very quickly. It was only like a few million people there at that time, but it was growing really quickly. And Grady again was expanding, and Emory was one of the better institutions in the South. And so I was fortunate enough to be chosen, in their residency program. That was like there were 800 applicants per residency, so it was really competitive. And I was fortunate enough to get in.
Wow, great.
Yeah, I came in '88 for the same reason. Well, I don't know if it was the same reason. I didn't want to be in the cold any longer in Massachusetts. I said, I'm going south because I want to be warm. So, and then CDC was here, so that was my ticket to Atlanta, pretty much. And it's interesting. I was also thinking about I taught at Morehouse School of Medicine in the Master of Public Health program.
Oh, really?
And I was thinking about the training that the physicians had in medical school, and we heard that was quite common back then. That there was very little training in nutrition and diet, and and so forth. So, do you think that's changing? Is that getting a little bit better?
A little bit, but not much. Actually, it's actually see that. Again, the standard of care is really dictated by the pharmaceutical industry. So like all the magazines that we get, the throwaway magazines, are basically sponsored by advertising from the pharmaceutical industry. So, you have the residencies, surgery and pediatrics and oncology and, OBGYN, but by and large, there's not a lot of room for nutrition. If you do a family practice now, there's some nutrition, but it's still not very robust.
Okay. Yeah. So people are needing that information. So Progressive, tell us a little bit about how you started Progressive and your for doing that, and what, because it sounds like you moved along that curve from being strict allopathic to being more allopathic and naturopathic.
Well, I have an interesting story about that. So I was practicing emergency medicine, and so in like my 12th year, I became depressed. I was like, I had low energy. I gained a lot of weight, and I just couldn't get going. And so my buddies said, "Oh, you just need some Valium or some whatever the antidepressant du jour was back then." But I knew it wasn't that. So basically, I took 2 years off and began studying functional medicine because I wanted to treat myself. So it turns out I had subclinical hypothyroidism. My thyroid gland wasn't working well. I wasn't absorbing iodine. And so once I realized what was going on with that, then I began studying and learning. I felt much better, obviously, once I fixed my thyroid gland. But then I realized there are so many people walking around with low thyroid function. And so I met Dr. Agoli, who actually owns Progressive. And so he was looking for a physician in Atlanta to expand his practice. So we just kind of hit it off from the beginning. He had another medical director at that time, but pretty quickly, I became, in charge. And so the rest was his history. But so what happens is so let me go back to the diet for a second. So here's the thing that is important for your audience to know. One size doesn't fit all. So let's talk about the gut for a second. Bernard was mentioning the colon. So there's 25 feet of small bowel. So when you place your hand over your abdomen, that's your small bowel. You also have 5 to 7 feet of colon, that's your large intestines. It goes along the outside edges. Now, your gut is populated by 100 trillion cells of bacteria. As a perspective, a tiny gram of stool has more cells of bacteria than our stars in the Milky Way galaxy. So huge waves of good healthy cells like acidophilus, like in yogurt or probiotic. However, and importantly, those good healthy cells live in harmony with some yeast, some viruses, and some parasites. And that's a normal ecosystem. We all have yeast, viruses, and parasites inhabiting our guts. The good healthy cells act as a barrier. They take up so much room that the yeast or bacteria or parasites can't overgrow. However, there are 5 things that can be done to change the balance in one's gut. For women, it's having babies and taking birth control pills for longer than 2 years. For men and women, it's antibiotics, steroids, and NSAIDs like Motrin or Napstin for pain, right? So let's say as a child, you have an earache or sore throat, you take a broad spectrum antibiotic like penicillin or amoxicillin. Or trying to kill the strep in your tonsils, the antibiotic will also kill good healthy bacteria that should be in your gut. There are no vacuums in nature. When the good healthy cells die, something has to take its place. So let's say first, for the sake of conversation, one gets too much yeast in their intestinal tract from taking antibiotics. In some people, that yeast will cause bloating or intestinal gas. Yeast can affect your short-term memory or concentration. Yeast can make you crave carbs like bread or pasta or sugar or even alcohol. Now, if you were to take some baker's yeast used to make bread rise, if you put that yeast in a bowl of warm water, put it in a dark corner, cover it, and leave it, you might expect the yeast to rise and to expand, but it doesn't actually. At least not unless you had a carbohydrate like sugar or flour, then it bloats. Now that's the gut of someone with lots of yeast, dark, warm, moist, and full of yeast. But more importantly, if you have an overgrowth or an imbalance of yeast or bacteria or parasites, it creates what we call leaky gut or leaky bowel syndrome. A traditional doctor may call it SIBO, small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, or you can call it intestinal dysbiosis. But I like the term leaky gut because it applies to foods. And here's why. So let's say you eat an apple, whereas you expect your digestive tract to digest the good healthy nutrients. Those nutrients go to your liver. That's how one gets nourishment. And then at least once a day, you should be able to expel the waste via normal stool. If it gets out of balance because of yeast or bacteria or parasites, then partially digested apple, in that example, will leak out of your gut into your bloodstream. And when that piece of apple leaks out of your gut into your bloodstream, your immune system thinks that piece of apple is a foreign invader and begins to try to fight it. So in your gut, you have antibodies or immunoglobulins like little Pac-Man floating around. When they see the piece of apple, they try to latch onto it. For instance, if you step on a nail, those same little Pac-Man will go to the bacteria on the nail or your sore throat or whatever. The exact same scenario happens if you eat food that leaks out of your gut into your bloodstream. So what happens is that foods that you would normally think are good for you tend to excite your immune system, and that creates autoimmune problems like, again, asthma, eczema, psoriasis, ulcerative colitis, Crohn's, cancer. Those are all caused by inflammation. 80% of your immune system is based in your gut. You have lymph nodes under your chin, under your arms, your groin region, and behind your knees. But the highest concentration of one's immune system is in the gut. It's called GALT, gastro-associated lymphoid tissue. So most chronic illnesses, I would say 99% of chronic illness and inflammation comes from the gut. It starts and stops at the gut. So after having said that, there's really not one diet that's going to be great for everybody, because you can easily be eating something that you are not aware that you're allergic to. Now, here's why. There are 2 types of food allergies, immediate and delayed. An immediate allergy in general takes only about 20 minutes for the symptoms to manifest. Say you're allergic to peanuts. Within 20 minutes, your lips are swollen, you're wheezing, you got a rash. You would take an antihistamine like Benadryl and avoid peanuts. When you go to a traditional doctor or an allergist, when they prick your skin, that's what they're looking for. Mold, pollen, grass, trees, dogs. You take Benadryl, you try to avoid those things. That skin test is called an IgE as an echo. Much more importantly, if your gut's out of balance from taking antibiotics or having babies or steroids, there's a secondary or delayed allergy that can take 5 to 7 days to show up. So imagine having some wheat on Monday, on Thursday, Friday, you're bloated or your memory's not so good or you don't sleep well or you gained a pound or two or your joints hurt. It's hard to make the association between what you ate on Monday and how you feel on Thursday or Friday because of time delay. The only way to pick up a delayed allergy is a blood test called IgG, as in golf. The skin test was Ig echo. Now, traditional allopaths never measure IgG because they don't believe or understand the concept of leaky gut. If you have bloating or gas or loose stools or constipation, they'll call it IBS, irritable bowel syndrome, and give you another pill to take. So what happens then is that's why there's no perfect diet. The most common delayed allergies in North America anyway are eggs, dairy, wheat, soy, corn, coffee, and aspartame. And when I say corn, I mean high fructose corn syrup, like in brownies or cookies or candy. But those are the most common only because those are the most commonly consumed items. Whatever a patient eats over and over again, if their gut is leaking, they'll become allergic to. So a lot of people have a healthy diet, they're eating whole wheat or they're eating whole milk or whatever, and they're severely allergic to it, they just don't realize it. You have a patient who drinks coffee once a day, when they put half and half in it, they come in with pain or memory loss or weight gain, blood sugar problems. Let's say I can't be allergic to coffee. I drink it all the time. I have no symptoms. Well, in fact, they might. That's not attributed to the coffee. So what you have to do is drill deeper to find out what the underlying source of inflammation is, and then those patients get better.
Wow.
Can you also share about how supplements can play an important part, given what you've described about food and the way the food allergens contain that help make us sick? How are supplements important for our intake, and how do people know what supplements to take or not to take?
So that's a very good question. And so the answer in general, this is a general statement, again, from practicing functional medicine for 23 years, is that it's not what supplements you take, it's what you absorb and metabolize. So if you have a gut problem, for instance, you can take the greatest supplements in the world, you just have expensive toilet water. You basically have to fix the underlying problem if it's inflammation. So let's say vitamin C. One of the best antioxidants or best supplements on the planet is vitamin C. If I was trapped on a desert island and I could only pick one thing, it'd be IV vitamin C. It's very good. It's an antioxidant. It's anti-inflammatory. But the problem is that if you consume whole foods with vitamin C and if your gut's inflamed, you can't absorb them. So supplements are very necessary. So something called reactive oxygen species or oxidative stress. So your body is constantly creating these oxidative items that cause inflammation, cause your body to age, cause your joints and muscles to break down, your skin to wrinkle. And so certainly antioxidants like vitamin C and E, will be beneficial. But what we try to do first is fix the underlying problem. So the supplements that are most beneficial early on without a lot of testing would be things like probiotics, which you can use to replenish your gut flora, and things like glutamine, which will help plug the holes in your gut. See, so let me make this story. So one of the reasons, Bernard, that we start with childhood is that when you're born, your gut is sterile. If you have a vaginal delivery, you come down your mom's vaginal tract, your nose and mouth picks up bacteria from the mom's vagina that begins building your immune system. Then if you're breastfed for at least 1 year, you have a strong immune system. Your immune system is fully formed by age 5. So if early in life you have earaches or sore throats, so you take antibiotics. Like I saw a guy, just recently who took 2 years of tetracycline for acne as a teenager. He destroyed his gut flora. Now he's got arthritis and memory and concentration problems. So if you take that same guy, he can take all the supplements in the world, but until you fix the underlying problem, which is imbalance in his gut, it won't really help. So there are definitely some great supplements: coenzyme Q10, vitamin C. I do. As a matter of fact, this is my bag of supplements for the evening. So I take them, but you want to have to first start by making sure your gut is healthy.
So do you recommend, and maybe I say recommend, let me ask it this way, in terms of doing what Ilan did so well, colonics, you think that's a healthy, that people should consider as cleaning for their gut, and enemas, coffee enemas?
Absolutely. So your body gets rid of toxins through your stool, your urine, and your skin. So those are all ways to detox. And so the colonics and also small bowel cleanses are very, very beneficial. You should, if you're otherwise healthy, at least once a year, I would recommend them, depending upon what's going on, sometimes even more often, right? Like there, for instance, you could walk on a hot day with 10 people. Some sweat profusely, others don't sweat at all. Sweating is a way to detox. And so that's why we use a far infrared sauna, or we suggest exercise. Then you have people, one of the definitions of constipation is not having a bowel movement at least once a day, right? One of several definitions. But if you're holding on to toxins, then your body wants to hold on to water to dilute those toxins. And then your weight goes up. 1 gallon of water weighs 8 pounds. Water is very heavy. So some people eat very little. They think they're eating foods that are good for them. But if those foods leak out of the gut into the bloodstream, the body will retain water. And so their weight goes up. And then they're not eliminating effectively those toxins from their stool. So colonics helps the path out.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'm also curious about free radicals and what radicals do to us in terms of our health. And can you say something about free radicals?
Sure. So just breathing, living creates free radicals. So a free radical basically is a molecule with an unpaired electron. So basically, if you have a bacteria in your body wants to use hydrogen peroxide. It makes its own hydrogen peroxide or oxygen singlets to try to kill the bacteria. Or just breathing creates free radicals. And so using antioxidants like C and E, you basically can quench the free radicals. And so one of the theories of aging is basically getting the inflammation caused by those free radicals under control. So when you have a free radical floating around in your bloodstream, it'll latch on to whatever it can to try to steal an electron. So it can damage your DNA. It can damage, the cell membranes and cholesterol. It creates havoc in the body. So some of the natural ways of getting it under control are, believe it or not, sleeping and eating well and exercising. Those will help to squash or diminish free radicals. And then certainly there are supplements like, again, vitamin C and E and glutathione that will also help diminish free radicals.
Okay. I had a question for you from one of our followers and good friends, Umi. She asked, what is your opinion on the master cleanse? I do it for 10 days and experience a complete colon cleanse and cell regeneration. I have lots of energy. Is this a good method? First of all, the master cleanse is the cleanse where you're taking water and lemonade and red pepper. What am I leaving out? Some people use
cayenne pepper and sometimes maple syrup.
I'm sorry.
Cayenne pepper, or some people use cayenne pepper and lemon and water and
agave.
Yeah. So to answer that question, yes, it can be. So apparently it's obviously working for that patient, but it wouldn't work for everybody. See, it depends on what your underlying inflammation is.
Right.
So yeah. So what happens is, so the reason that I do intermittent fasting or time eating is because if you fast, then it forces your body's got to get energy from someplace. So it will take damaged cells and consume it for energy. So it's kind of a way to regenerate new healthy cells. So a person who's otherwise healthy and sometimes not so healthy can do a master cleanse and feel better. But if you're already inflamed, oftentimes that doesn't work. So many people will try that and don't feel as good. So let's say you have a patient that has a chronic illness like arthritis. They have their joints hurt. They have osteo or rheumatoid arthritis. They'll do a master cleanse. They won't see much benefit. If that listener, that viewer did better, then they're probably in general not too unhealthy.
Right. She's pretty healthy. She walks a lot and exercises a lot and stays active. She said she uses spring water, fresh lemons, maple syrup, and cayenne.
Yeah, exactly.
That's her.
Yeah. I've seen lots of people over the years get great results in it, but I've also seen many people, it won't budge them.
Right, right. Yeah, that's it. I mean, we're all different. And like you said, there's no one size or one remedy that fits everyone. It really has to do with what you
We used to believe that health was determined by genetics and environment. We thought it was 50% genetics and 50% environmental. Now we know it's only 20% genetics. The other 80% is actually environmental. How you eat, how you exercise or not, how you pray, all those things will impact your longevity and also your health.
Right, right, exactly. 20/80, and most people don't realize that. you know.
Yeah.
And so the diet, the exercise, the environment, breathing, oxygen, you know, it's all so important.
And the water.
Sleeping. Don't
And the
forget sleeping. One of the biggest is sleeping. Most people have poor sleep hygiene.
right.
They're going to bed looking at the phone, or they're going to bed late, or basically are distracted, you know, and they're not sleeping restfully, you know. So that's pretty important.
Guilty. You know, he's he's so disciplined. He like curls up. He says, "I'm out. I'm going to bed." And I say, "Okay, okay." You know, going through text messages and stuff at night. I know I shouldn't do that. I'm a work in progress, like all of us. I will get better. I promise I will get better.
You mentioned this earlier, Dr. Bouquette, about the thyroid gland, and it's important. Could you say a little bit, because I didn't get my thyroid gland checked until I got to progressive, and I've been going to the doctor off and on, getting annual physical. Never got my thyroid gland checked. Got to progressive, did a test, and found out I think that my T3 and T4 were extremely low.
Mm-hmm.
Where I thought I was, you know, depressed, or I couldn't lose weight. Say the importance for hormonal tests for both men and women, thyroid, and like for me, you know, I could reveal this, that if I had not come to progressive, I don't know if I would have found out that my estrogen level as a male was over 100. And and so Dr. Mastro, who was working with me at the time, looked at me, I never forget, she said, Mr. Kynes, we got to get this estrogen down, because men get breast cancer also. So can you say something about the importance of glands, gland therapy, or glands checked?
Absolutely. Absolutely. That's an important point. You're right. So the thyroid really is the master gland. It controls your metabolism, among other things. Now, so there are actually 80 different symptoms of hypo or low thyroid function. Things like cold intolerance or heat intolerance, cold hands, cold feet, dry skin, brittle nails, hair loss, constipation, anxiety, weight gain, depression, insomnia, fatigue, carpal tunnel syndrome, restless leg syndrome, sleep apnea, snoring, low sex drive, ringing in the ears, seasonal allergies. I mean, literally, there are 80. It goes on and on. The thyroid gland is basically your master organ. But your thyroid gland needs iodine in order to work well. And a lot of people don't consume iodine in iodinized salt because it's highly refined. It's just not good for you. And if you use Himalayan sea salt, there's very little iodine in it. Iodine is primarily gotten from seafood or kelp, and then also animals, but the animals get it from plants like beef. But again, the way that farming is done, the soil doesn't have any iodine in it. So a woman's body needs extra iodine because her breast, ovaries, and thyroid gland need iodine. For men, it's thyroid and prostate. So 80% of people who have low thyroid are women because they have more tissue to cover for iodine. So like you, I was misdiagnosed with low thyroid because a traditional doctor will only look at the TSH, thyroid stimulating hormone. TSH is a signal from your brain to your thyroid to make more hormones. There's nothing wrong with your brain or your thyroid, but if your gut's not absorbing nutrients like iodine, then you have symptoms of hypo or low thyroid function. So what we do is we start by measuring the iodine in your saliva and urine, make sure you have adequate amounts, and then we look at what's called a free T3, free T4, total T3, total T4, and reverse T3, and then thyroid antibodies. There's something called Hashimoto's, where your immune system, your gut will actually attack your thyroid gland. That's an autoimmune problem. So once you have enough information with the thyroid, then you can rebalance it. Now, in your adrenal glands, so when you put your hands on your hips, where your thumbs are your kidneys. Seeing atop your kidneys are your adrenal glands, and they respond to stress. Someone bursts in and frightens you, someone makes you mad, you want to fight or run, fight or flight. Your heart rate goes up, your blood pressure goes up, you're sweating, you're ready to fight or run away. But as soon as the danger or irritation passes, the adrenal levels come down and you calm down. However, when you're under long-term stress, it doesn't have to be psychological, like a bad job or a bad marriage or the unfortunate passing of your mom. It can be physical, like leaky gut. You initially have high levels of cortisol in response. Chronic stress causes low cortisol levels, and that causes chronic inflammation. That's your gut, and that can lead to fatigue. Now, in your adrenal glands, your body makes testosterone, right? And so women make testosterone, men make estrogen. But if your body's inflamed, you can convert testosterone to estrogen, and there are also bacteria in the gut that will raise your estrogen levels. And so then men will have very high levels of estrogen. So not only can you get breast cancer, but it'll inflame your prostate. Right. So again, you have to look at a holistic overall picture to look at that. So again, with women, a lot of women who have fibrocystic breast disease or ovarian cysts or symptoms of low thyroid merely just have low iodine. You correct the iodine problem, and they usually will get much, much better.
Mm.
That's interesting. I just got some iodine last time, because I went through a series of progressive. Iodine is one of the things that was recommended, and now that you described it so well, I think I'll make sure that I that I take it every day.
Good idea. Yeah. No,
We're near the end of the show, Dr. We want to share a video, and then we want you to hang around and talk with us after the show.
Sure.
But we want to share this video that we share weekly. It's a documentary that I had the fortunes of being in, but more than me being a part, it's the storyline and of George. And I'm going to ask our producers to run that for us now, and then we'll be back and let you have a last word to our audience, and then we'll have some conversation after we end the broadcast.
Excellent. Okay.
Thank you. Janet?
Eagles versus pigeons. Which one would you rather be?
We said I want to be an eagle.
Why?
Because they fly higher than pigeons.
And what does that allow them to do?
See more.
Who are you?
So much of who I am today is my experience growing up in my hometown of Kansas City.
My mother had me at 15.
All I wanted was somebody to love me.
What have I done that's so bad that you can't forgive?
Mama set me up to go to prison instead of her. When the judge sentenced me to 11 years, I said, I'll show you. I think about the system that failed her. I am not what has happened to me.
Your story, your experiences, your being seen, still exhibit.
Well, I kind of always escape through art. If I just took the next step, the world would open up before me. Share this inner light within you. I am not what has happened to me. I am what I choose to become.
That is a great film and documentary, and a story of resilience and love and forgiveness and so many things. And art and talent is just so much packed into that movie. So we highly recommend that people see it. And that pretty much does it for our show this evening. Dr. Bouquette, we will have to have you come back. We're just warming up. We have so much information that is just valuable for our watchers and listeners. So we hope that you'll take us up and come back.
Absolutely. I really appreciate the invitation. It was fortunate, Bernard. I run into you on Saturday. So good to see you again. I look forward to joining you guys again.
Thank you. We look forward to it. And I join Imani in thanking you for sharing just the wealth of information, saying more about Progressive, because I think it's a great place. I'm there almost weekly. And to one of the listeners want to know when it will be released. It's already released. It's on HBO Max. It's on HBO Max. Right. The Master of Light. So last word.
Oh,
go ahead.
I'm sorry. No, I want to ask our producers to put up the contact information for Dr. Bouquette, so that if people want to reach out, this is how you can reach him, via email and website. It's on our screen. medical-capital.com website, www.medical-capital.com. All right.
Thank you.
Dr. Bouquette, do you have a final word you want to say to our audience before we leave?
Well, I want to thank you guys. My final word is thanking you guys for, I'm going to follow your podcast because it sounds like you're doing some very interesting things. And so I think information is powerful. And again, what you're doing is sharing information and also spiritual guidance. And so, you know, my hat's off to both you guys. I'm good meeting you as well, Amani, and I look forward to joining you guys again.
Thank you
Thank
so
you.
much.
Yeah, follow us
Appreciate
on
you.
the YouTube channel. That would be the better one. Would you say?
Yeah, progressively
Yeah.
yours.
Excellent.
We got part. We just have the LY, progressively yours.
Right.
Okay.
Exactly.
Excellent. Okay. All
All
right,
right.
guys. Thanks again.
All right,
You're
thank you.
welcome. Thank you.
Yeah.
And to all of you who listening to us out in the audience, we thank you for joining us tonight, and we'll see you next week here on Progressively Yours Health and Wellness Podcast. Good evening.
Namaste.
Ashe.
Bye.